بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. The first hadith which we are going to look at is a hadith narrated by Sayyiduna Anas radhiyallahu anhu, and this hadith can be found in Imam Bayhaqi rahimullah's Shu'abul Iman, that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam has said, إِذَا تَزَوَّجَ الْعَبْدُ, which means that when a person marries, فَقَدْ اسْتَكْمَلَ نِصْفَ الدِّينِ, he indeed has completed half of his deen and half of his religion. فَلْيَتَّقِ اللَّهَ فِي النِّصْفِ الْبَاقِي, hence he should now fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala regarding the remaining half. Now this particular hadith tells us the virtues and the fadail of getting married, and the interpretation of this particular hadith has already been looked at before. But what we can gather, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is telling us that when a person gets married, he completes half of his deen and half of his religion. In what way? When a person, when he gets married, it saves himself from many sins. And the two main things which saves or protects a person through marriage is number one, adultery, fornication, and number two, looking at unlawful women. Are you casting a gaze at unlawful women? That is a sin, that is unlawful, that is haram. But by getting married, a person is protected from these two main and great sins. And when you look at it, Iman is to abstain from prohibitions, to abstain from sins, to abstain from unlawful and haram things. So therefore, when a person gets married, he's already on the way towards complete Iman. He's already done half of it. And that is like he's staying away from sins. So now what he has to do is that he now has to work hard and endeavor on the other part of Iman, and that is by achieving taqwa and piety, refraining from other things which are unlawful and haram in Islam. So that is the true virtue of getting married. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said that by getting married, an individual has completed half of his Iman and half of his faith. The next hadith which we are going to look at, again it's also narrated by Imam Bayhaqi in his Shu'abul Iman. This time this hadith is narrated by Sayyidah Aisha anha, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said, Inna a'zama nikahi barakatan aysaruhu ma'una, which means the nikah or the marriage where there is the most barakah and the most blessings, is that nikah aysaruhu ma'una, where the least expenses have been taken. Where the least expenses have been taken. Now this hadith here, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is telling us that, okay, fair enough, you want to go ahead with the marriage, you want to get married, you want to do the nikah. But if you want barakah and blessings in that particular nikah and marriage, then what you should do is that you should have that nikah according to the sunnah, and that nikah should be simple. Aysaruhu ma'una, the least of expenses. This hadith is telling us that when we are getting married, we should not be lavish. We should not waste our money on singers. We should not waste our money on hiring a DJ to play some music at the nikah. That is not, say for example, there's going to be no barakah and blessings in that particular nikah and marriage. And even when we look at couples who are married, actually this hadith is so true. Obviously the words of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam are true, but it's a prophecy which is so true in this day and age. And couples will tell you that the nikah, when they got married and when it was really lavish and they hired, this fancy hall and they hired this particular photographer to come, and or this particular, video camera and so on and so forth, or singers, they will tell you that afterwards the nikah hits the ropes in terms of there's hardly any barakah there, the couples start fighting, they start quarreling, and unfortunately sometimes these nikah end in divorce and end in talaq. However, the nikah where there was simplicity, where there was, as we say in Urdu, sadgi, where there was least expenses done, you did everything according to the book, according to the sunnah, then there is more barakah and more blessing in that particular nikah and in that particular marriage. Now there is the issue here, which I'm not going to discuss now, but I'm going to leave it until a later chapter, under the chapter of walima, is hiring, say for example, a hall, is that considered against this particular hadith? Is it considered against simplicity? Or is, say for example, inviting hundreds or even thousands of people to a particular walima, is that considered against sadgi or is that considered against simplicity? Inshallah, we'll look at this particular issue later on. But one point which I'm going to mention regarding this particular hadith, and this point was beautifully once said by one of my teachers, Shaykh al-Hadith, Maulana Yusuf Mutala Sahib. He said that many people use this hadith to hide their stinginess. What do we mean by that? Hazrat was trying to imply that sometimes what happens is that people, they are actually stingy. They don't want to spend any money, not waste the money, because obviously wasting money is against the Sharia, but they don't want to spend any money. So what they would do is that they will use this hadith and say, oh, by the way, nikah should be done simply, let's have no walima at all. Let's invite no one at all. Let's just have a cup of tea and that will be okay. No. Because walima is a sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So whatever Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, you can't consider that to be against simplicity and against sadgi. So what Hazrat was trying to imply is that, look, many people here, they use this hadith in the wrong place. And what they want to do, they want to actually hide their stinginess, and they don't want to actually spend any money, they don't want to hire a hall, they don't want to give any food out, they don't want to have more than one dish. So what they do is that they say, oh yeah, the hadith says it should be simple in your nikah, hence no hall, we're just going to have one dish, and so on and so forth. So what Hazrat was trying to imply is that these people are not acting upon the hadith, they are actually hiding their stinginess. So there is an issue, there is a fine line between what can you consider to be simplicity and what then boils over or turns over to extravagance. Inshallah, we'll look at that in the walima section, which will be coming up in a few pages time, inshallah ta'ala. Now the next chapter which we're going to look at, in Arabic, it's entitled Babul Nadri ila al-Makhtuba wa Bayan al-Awrad, which means to look at a prospective suitor wa Bayan al-Awrad, and the chapter regarding awra and satar. Now in this chapter we're going to be looking at two things, inshallah. The first thing which we'll be looking at is the rulings when it comes to looking at a prospective suitor, or you just say a boy who wants to get married to a particular girl, then the rulings with regards to seeing that particular girl and so on and so forth. And the second issue, or the second topic which we are going to look at, is with regards to the awra, the satar. The part of the body a man has to cover, the part of the body a woman has to cover in front of other people. So these two topics will be discussed in this particular chapter. Now regarding the first issue, what we can derive from the hadith and also from the text of the jurist is that for a boy to look at a particular girl before he gets married, or for a girl to look at a particular boy before she gets married, not only is it permissible, but it's actually recommended and it's mustahab and desirable to do that. There are two hadiths which I'm going to mention to you. The first hadith narrated by Sayyidina Mughira bin Shu'bah radhiyallahu anhu, and he narrates that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to him to look at the suitor, or to look at the girl who you intend to marry. Why? فَإِنَّهُ أَحْرَى أَن يُؤْدَمَ بَيْنَكُمَا, because it will build or create love between you two. And in another hadith of Sunan Abu Dawood and Musnad Ahmad, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that when you propose to a woman for marriage, then if he is able to look at what will induce him to marry her, he should do so. Meaning that if it's possible to look at the particular girl, what you are attracted to this particular girl, then you should look at her. Why? Because that will there afterwards will create love and muhabba between you two. So what we can gather from these two ahadith is that it is a sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and a practice of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, a saying or a command of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that the boy, he should always look at the girl before he gets married. And unfortunately, again, this is where jahala and ignorance takes over. That you'll get some people, they actually think this, that the boy and the girl, they shouldn't look at each other. They'll say, yeah, I've chosen this girl for my son, or I've chosen this boy for my daughter. That's it. The only time they can look at each other will be on the wedding day. But before that, they can't look at each other at all. What we can see is that such a belief totally goes against the hadith. And when you look at it, such a belief, we call that in Urdu tashaddud, or in another way to look at it, extremism. And when you look at Islam, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said in the Quran, وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا, which means that this ummah or the religion of Islam is a moderate religion. And where the tashaddud, or where the harshness, or where the extremism comes from, it comes from people who misinterpret the Holy Quran, who distort the meanings of the Holy Quran without any knowledge, and then they give a kind of extreme kind of view of Islam. However, when you look through the Quran and Hadith, hardly any tashaddud there, there's hardly any strictness there, there's hardly any harshness there. So exactly here as well, the Sharia is very open, and it actually encourages the boy to look at the girl, and also the girl to look at the boy before they get married. Now there's a few rulings which I'm going to inshallah mention regarding this particular issue. The first ruling is that what we can derive from the hadith is that it is permissible for the boy to look at the girl and the girl to look at the boy. The second ruling which we can derive from the hadith is that it is only permissible for the boy to look at the girl's face and to look at the girl's hands. That's it, nothing else. Even to the extent that if the boy says to the girl, oh, can I have a look at some other parts of your body? Totally prohibited, totally haram. Only two parts the boy is allowed to look at, her face and her hands. And the reason why the Sharia has restricted to look at these two things is because when you look at the face, then obviously you can derive the beauty of the girl who you are marrying. And when you look at her hands, then you can derive her build. You can derive that whether she is thin, whether she is fat, whether she is big, whether she is small. So that's why the Sharia has limited the looking at the particular girl to two body parts. They are her face and her hands. The third ruling, which is very, very important, is that it should be borne in mind that this girl who you are looking at is still your ghair mahram, is still a stranger. Which means that when you look at this particular girl, you cannot be alone in a room with her. So if you are going to look at her, then either there has to be someone there with the girl, like say for example her brother, her father or someone, or like for example her mother. But again, if her mother is going to be there, then she will have to do parda from you as well. Or if you are going to, or if you do want to see her privately or in a particular room, then the Sharia says that at least then keep the door open. Don't have the door closed in a particular room and the boy and the girl having the meeting. You should at least, the very least, have the door open. And the reason why is because it's mentioned in the hadith of Sunan al-Tirmidhi that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said that when a man and a woman are alone together, لا يخلون رجل بامرأة إلا كان ومعها ثالثها الشيطان أو كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام, that when a man and a woman are together, the third presence or the third person there who is present is shaitan. Meaning that shaitan then will try to draw some kind of like temptation and fitna between the boy and girl. Hence there should be no khalwa at all. Now this is a very important ruling regarding khalwa. What constitutes khalwa, what constitutes seclusion with a boy and a girl? Now seclusion or khalwa is that the boy and the girl are in such a room or such an environment where a third person can't easily enter that particular room. That is called khalwa, that is called seclusion. So just say, for example, if you take that room at the back there, so if the boy and girl were there and the door was closed, then it's not easy for the third person to enter that particular room in terms of he'll have to like open the door, sometimes the door may get jammed and so on. So that will constitute khalwa. Basically, where you are alone with a girl and there's basically no one else can see you, a third person can't easily enter, hence that will constitute khalwa. Now this is very important because sometimes it does happen like at work, you may need to be alone in a room with a female colleague. So if you are in a room with a female colleague and just say it's a room where there's no windows about and basically just like enclosed room and the door is locked, then that will constitute khalwa. What you should do in that situation, if you really need to have a meeting with a female colleague, is at least leave the door open so it doesn't constitute khalwa. And even it could be something simple, like if you are in a lift. Again, if there's just you and a girl there in a lift, that will constitute khalwa as well. So especially like if you are, again, work, or if you are, say, college or university, and if you are on the lift, then if you, say, for example, happen to be there with a girl, or you see that you're the only one there, then a girl is about to come, then what you should do is that you should actually try to walk out of that particular lift. Obviously, not in mid-air, but what I mean is that when it opens and so on, then you should walk out. But obviously, if there is more than one girl there, so let's say you and then there are 2, 3 girls, then that's okay. That doesn't constitute khalwa. So as long as you keep your gaze down, then inshallah that should be sufficient and permissible. So just keep these rulings in mind. Obviously, regarding khalwa, it's very dangerous, and there are so many prohibitions regarding that in the ahadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, the first hadith which we are going to look at of this particular chapter, very famous hadith which can be found in Sahih Muslim, narrated by Sayyiduna Abu Hurairah al-Anhu, that قال جاء رجل إلى النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم, that once a person came to Rasulullah صلى الله عليه وسلم and he said, إني تزوجت امرأة من الأنصار, which means that I have made an intention, or I intend, or I propose to marry a woman from the Ansar. Now, by this particular companion using the word min al-Ansar, it's kind of indicating that this particular companion was a muhajir. And who is a muhajir? Muhajir are those who migrated from Makkah to Medina Munawwara. And Ansar are those who were residing in Medina Munawwara before Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's coming. So basically, this muhajir, he wanted to marry a girl from the Ansar. Now, what did Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam say to him? فَانْظُرْ إِلَيْهَا, go and look at her, go and see her. فَإِنَّ فِي أَعْيُنِ الْأَنصَارِ شَيْئًا. Why? Because there is something in the eyes of the Ansar. Now, what is the meaning of this hadith, that there is something in their eyes? The meaning of this hadith is that the Ansar, they were known, or one of their qualities were that they had blue eyes, whilst the muhajir, i.e. the muhajir women, they normally had the brown and black eyes and so on. So what happened was that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he knew that the Ansari boys in particular, they had blue eyes, so he thought that, or he assumed that even the girls will also have blue eyes as well. And it may be something kind of like a bit, I should say, well, you won't say weird, but a bit kind of, it may put that person off guard if he was to marry and then realize that his wife or the girl which he married got blue eyes. So obviously, generally speaking, like even now, many of us really don't have blue eyes. But just for example, if you didn't look at the girl and then you got married, then you just realize, oh, she's got blue eyes, it may kind of leave a sour taste on your tongue, like you might be thinking, oh, I really don't want to marry this particular girl, she's got blue eyes, she looks a bit, I won't say weird, but what I mean is that you just feel a bit uneasy about the situation. So similarly here as well, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to the companion, look, you may feel a bit uneasy about the situation because they've got blue eyes, hence, فَانْظُرْ إِلَيْهَا, go and look at her. So from this we can derive the desirability of the boy looking at the girl before they get married. The next hadith which we're going to look at is a hadith from Sahih al-Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, narrated by Ibn Mas'ud al-Anhu, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said, لا تباشر المرأة المرأة فتنعتها لزوجها كأنه ينظر إليها. That Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said that a woman should not describe another woman in front of her husband. فَتَنْعَتَهَا لِزَوْجِهَا كَأَنَّهُ يَنْظُرُ إِلَيْهَا, in such a way that it as though that the husband is looking at her. Now again, this hadith, because as I said that this section which we are looking at, it's not just restricted to looking at a prospective suitor, but it's also talked about awra and talked about parda and hijab and so on and so forth. So the first hadith which the author has mentioned is that a woman or a wife should not describe, say, her friend in such a way, like describe her features or her beauty or her mold in such a way to her husband, it as though that the husband is actually thinking about or is picturing this particular girl in his mind. And this something happens quite a lot actually in our community, where sometimes, if it's just general, like if a wife was to talk about a friend, generally like, oh, my friend does this, or she works there, or she teaches there, that's okay. But if you are going to describe your friend's beauty to your husband in terms of, oh, my friend's got white face, she's got blue eyes, or she got blonde hair, in such a way, in detailed way, where the husband is then thinking about this particular girl, then that is unlawful and that is haram. And obviously the reasons are simple. Why is it haram? Because first of all, it's immoral to do that. And number two is that it can then lead to the husband having unlawful thoughts about this girl or your friend who you have described, which again can lead to temptation, lead to fitna, lead to adultery, lead to fornication. So therefore Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said that a wife should not describe her friends or the beauty of another woman to a husband in such a way. The next hadith which we're going to look at is a hadith this time which can be found in Sahih Muslim, narrated by Sayyiduna Abu Sa'id al-Khudri anhu, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said that a man should not look at the awra or the private parts of another man, and a woman should not look at the private parts or the awra of another woman. And then the hadith goes on to say, وَلَا يُبْدِ الرَّجُلْ إِلَى الرَّجُلْ فِي ثَوْبٍ وَاحِدٍ, which means that a man should not sleep with another man under one duvet, وَلَا تُفْضِ الْمَرْأَةُ إِلَى الْمَرْأَةِ فِي ثَوْبٍ وَاحِدٍ, and that a woman should not sleep with another woman under one duvet. Now there are two parts to this particular hadith. The first part regarding this particular hadith is the satar and the awra, that whether a man can look at the awra or the private parts of another man, and the second issue is regarding women looking at the awra and the satar of another woman. Now we're going to start off firstly with the man satar. The man satar or awra, as you know, is the area from his belly button up to and including his knee. So that area we call the awra, that area we call the satar. So a man is not allowed to look at another man's satar or that particular area. And if he does, then that is totally haram, that is totally unlawful. There is an exception with regards to medicine and tadawi, and with, like for example, a male doctor looking at a male's private organ. We look at that inshallah later. But generally speaking, a man cannot look at the awra or the private parts of another man. That is totally haram, that is totally unlawful. Now with regards to the woman's awra or woman's satar, there are a few situations. The first situation is that the woman's satar or awra in namaz or in salah. Now the satar or the awra of a woman, what I mean by awra is basically that part which she has to cover all time. So the awra of a woman in namaz or in salah is her entire body besides her face, her hands up to her wrists, and her feet up to her ankles. So besides these three parts which can be left exposed, the other parts she has to cover in salah and in namaz. So this includes her hair. This even includes the area below her chin. Sometimes women, when they are praying the salah, they do their scarf in such a way that the area below their chin is left exposed. So again, strictly speaking, their namaz will not be done. So the only thing which can be left exposed is basically their face. So face is from the tip of the forehead up to the chin and from one earlobe to another. Their hands up to their wrist and their feet up to their ankles. These are the only things which can be left exposed in salah. Any other part, if they were to be exposed, a quarter of the limb, if they were to be exposed, and if it was exposed for the duration of 3 subhanallahs, then their namaz will break. So what I mean by that, just for example, if they were praying salah and their arm was exposed, to say a quarter of the arm was exposed, and it was exposed for the duration of 3 subhanallahs, then their namaz will automatically break. And the same also goes for men as well. As I mentioned, that the area which a man has to cover in salah is from his belly button up to and including his knees. So sometimes it happens that, especially in the summer, when brothers come with their t-shirts and their jeans and so on, so when they go into ruku, so what happens is that the t-shirt comes up and their pants go down. So you could see their backside. So again, if that area, if their back area was kind of exposed for the duration of 3 subhanallah, your namaz breaks. And obviously when you are in ruku, you're going to be there for 3 subhanallah, so your namaz will automatically break. So this is something which is very important, as I said, regarding salah. You can't, there's no flexibility in salah. You're praying in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so if any of these areas were to be exposed, then your salah and your namaz would break. So that is the aura of a woman in salah. The next issue, the next ruling is the aura of a woman, i.e. the area which she has to cover in front of her mahrams. So mahram here means her father, her brother, uncle, and so on and so forth. Now the scholars have mentioned that the area which she has to cover in front of her mahram are basically the area from her belly button up to and including her knee, her chest area, and her back. So these are the two, you could say like the 3 parts she has to cover. The area from her belly button up to and including her knees, her chest area, and her back, all her back, up to her shoulders. So these things have to be covered in front of her father, in front of her brother, in front of her mahram like her uncle and so on and so forth. As I said, that is the ruling. Obviously out of modesty and so on, the girl will probably cover her hair as well. But if she did leave her hair exposed in front of her brother or in front of her father, then that is not considered a sin. So that is the aura or the area which she has to cover in front of her mahram. With regards to the aura in front of a non-mahram, a ghair mahram, then the ruling is that she has to, technically speaking, in the Hanafi fiqh it says that she has to cover her entire body, besides her face, hands, and her feet. Technically meaning like when you look in the classical books of Hanafi fiqh, it says that only those parts of the body has to be can be left exposed, but besides that, the others have to be covered. Then he goes on to say, however, in Raddul Mukhtar, which is a very famous Hanafi jurisprudence book, the most authoritative in the Hanafi jurisprudence, it then goes on to say that due to the apprehension of fitna and mischief, in this day and age it is wajib for women to do the niqab, i.e. they have to cover their face as well. So basically what we can gather, and the issue of niqab, I don't want to go into detail here, there is a hadith which we're going to look at later, so I'll probably mention a bit more detail there. But basically what we can derive this from the text is that a woman in front of strange men, ghair mahram men, she will have to cover her entire body, including her face as well. The only thing she can leave exposed obviously will be the area between her eyes, her hands and her feet, that can be left exposed, but besides that the entire body has to be covered. So these are the 3 rulings with regards to the awra and the sadr. Now the next part of the hadith then goes on to say that it's not permissible for a man to sleep with another man under one duvet and for a woman to sleep with another woman under a duvet. Now again, the ruling or the masla is that this impermissibility applies when the two men who are sleeping under one duvet, they are both naked. Basically, they're not wearing anything at all. So for them to sleep under one duvet, then that will be impermissible. And we know why, because obviously there's a danger of something unlawful or impermissible happening. However, if both the men, if they are wearing something like pajamas or something like that, and they are sleeping under one duvet, then that will be permissible. Although a bit disliked, why? Because of fitna and mischief. However, if there was, say, lack of space, or just say there's like a wedding or something going on at home and you can't fit everyone in the bed, so if two people were to sleep like that, then that would be permissible. What would be more ideal is that you could have two people sleeping in one bed, but in two or with two different duvets. That would be more preferable. Obviously, preferable will be like one guy on one bed basically and the other on the floor. That would be more preferable. However, if, say, for example, there's some kind of necessity or some kind of durura, then it is more ideal that you have two people sleeping in the same bed but two different duvets. That would be more preferable. If they can't, or if you for some reason cannot manage that, then obviously you can have two people under one duvet, but make sure that they're wearing clothes. And what is impermissible and what is haram is if they are both naked or wearing very, very thin clothes, then for them to sleep under one duvet, that would not be allowed. Why? Because there's a danger of fitna and there's a danger of mischief. The next hadith which we are going to look at, the meaning has already come before. It's a hadith of Sahih Muslim narrated by Sayyidina Jabir anhu that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Ala la yabitanna rajulun inda imra'atin sayyibin." That it's not permissible for a man to spend the night with a sayyib, with a married woman, illa ay yakuna nakihan aw za mahramin, unless the man happens to be the husband of this woman, aw za mahram, or he happens to be the mahram of this particular woman. So again, the meaning of the hadith is very straightforward, and that hadith, in this hadith is telling us that a man is not allowed to spend a night with a woman under one roof or under one house. What do I mean by night? Even like, for example, you may not have, na'udhu the unlawful intention, but even being in a house with a woman who's not your next of kin, who's not a relative of you, who's not your mahram, a strange woman, that is totally haram. Why? Again, is because the deception of shaitan, where he will play certain tricks trying to deceive you, and he will kind of like put these kind of thoughts where you will end up doing haram. And this is something which you need to be aware that shaitan is very, very clever, very, very deceptive. Certain things which are haram, he will bring it to you as something halal and something lawful. And there are many examples where, unfortunately, many of our youngsters are involved where they know to right that any unlawful contact or any contact with a woman is unlawful enough. They know that. But the way shaitan will come to you is that, just go to her for da'wah. Go to her just, with the intention that, you're preaching to her, that you're giving her da'wah about Islam. He will add something halal or lawful or something, rewardable with the haram. So you then think, it's a good idea, I should go and speak to this particular woman regarding da'wah and about preaching and Islam. So you go there, and then you start talking about Islam. But then slowly, the Islamic side of the conversation will go away, and then you start talking about unlawful things and haram things. So this is something which shaitan is very, very clever, is very, very deceptive. So therefore Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam advises that we should not spend the night with any women, even though the word married women has been mentioned, but the scholars of hadith have said that any women, you're not allowed to spend the night with them unless the man happens to be the husband of the woman, or he happens to be the mahram, i.e. the father or the brother, and so on. Which then takes me on to the next hadith, again a very famous hadith of Sahih al-Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, narrated by Uqba bin Amir anhu that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said, إِيَّاكُمْ وَالدُّخُولَ عَلَى النِّسَاءِ. That Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said that do not enter the homes of women. So any homes where there are women there and lawful women there who you are not supposed to be there, then you should not enter their homes. One of the companions then asked, Ya Rasulullah, Ara'ayta al-hamwa? What about in-laws? Can the brother-in-law enter the house of that particular woman? Can a sister-in-law enter the house of that particular groom or that particular husband? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam then replied by saying, Al-hamwu al-maut, i.e. in-laws are death. Now what's the meaning of this particular hadith? Now this is something very important because, again, unfortunately we live in such a society where a relationship with in-laws is considered something, basically, what I mean, there is no such thing as parda or hijab between in-laws. That's what people think. They think, oh, he's a sister-in-law, relax, chill out with her. Some people think that, oh, the brother-in-law, it doesn't matter, it's like considered a custom for the brother-in-law to joke with his Barbie, you call him, or his sister-in-law. It's considered to be like normal and okay. How the Sharia is very strict regarding this masla. And they said that no, your in-laws are considered strange, they're considered like a strange woman, and the rules which you have been looking at before with regards to seclusion, with regards to lowering your gaze, it also applies with in-laws as well. Now the reason why, and again, this is beauty of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam words, how true he is, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said that the reason why is because such a relationship can lead towards death. How can it lead towards death? Couple of ways. The first way is that, and there have been cases where in-laws have the relationship has gone one step further and they've committed adultery or zina. Now what then happens is that in an Islamic state, as you know, that whoever commits adultery or zina, they are stoned to death. So therefore Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said that stay away from your in-laws. Why? Because if he was to go one step further, and if he were to, may Allah forbid, commit adultery or fornication with them, then in an Islamic state, you'll be stoned to death. Hence, in-laws will take you towards death. That's what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said. Or another meaning of this particular hadith is that in-laws, because again of an unlawful relationship, could lead to the husband divorcing the wife. And when a wife or a woman is divorced, it is though that she is considered to be dead in that particular society. We're talking about in those days, and you could say to a certain extent in this day and age as well, in certain cultures, that when a woman is divorced, it's very, very difficult for her to get married again. People don't want to get married to her because they think, oh well, she's already been divorced. If I was to marry her, she'll probably, run away, or I'll probably need to divorce her and so on. So we see that when a woman is already divorced once, very difficult for her to get married again. So therefore, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said that, look, such a relationship between a sister-in-law and brother-in-law, and if the husband was to find out he may divorce his wife, then that divorce is like a death sentence for that particular woman in that particular society. Hence, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said that the relationship with in-laws can lead towards death. So therefore, it is impermissible for a brother-in-law to spend time, to be intimate, to be very close with his sister-in-law, because these kind of things does lead to, rather than shaitan, very clever, very deceptive. You may put these thoughts that, oh, she's a sister-in-law, you're just going to talk to her. But what could happen is that shaitan, very, very clever, he could put thoughts in your heart of slowly of developing feelings for your sister-in-law, which can obviously lead to the breakup of marriage, but also lead to a breakup of a household. Because then what happens is that if the brother, let's say the husband or your brother was to find out, then obviously most likely he's not going to want to have any connection with you. So that kind of leads to infighting in the family, leads to split up of family, leads to like breakup of relationship, not of the husband and wife, but also between siblings, between a brother and another brother, between sisters and brothers, and so on and so forth. That leads to a lot of fights, a lot of arguments, a lot of bickering, a lot of backbiting, and so on. So therefore, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has told us that we should stay away from in-laws. Why? Because intimate relationship, close relationship with them may lead towards death. Inshallah, we'll just leave it there for this week. May Allah just give tawfiq to everyone to be said.